Well, greetings, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar today. My name is George Litterst. I'm speaking to you from a little town of Rehoboth, Massachusetts on the east coast of the United States. I'm a musician, pianist, music educator, and I'm the head of a little software company called Time Warp Technologies. And we'll be talking about that a little bit more in a moment, but I want to quickly tell you that I'm very excited to have with me a very good friend and musical colleague, Andrew Harbridge, who's coming to you from across my northern border in Canada. Andrew, welcome today.
Thank you very much, George. And I'm excited to be here and very excited to show off all the new material we have in SuperScore. So I'm a teacher, like George mentioned, from Canada, across the border. I'm in a city of about 80,000, just outside of Toronto, Ontario. And I studied with the Royal Conservatory up to an advanced level, but I completed my studies with Conservatory Canada, and I achieved the Gold Medal of Excellence for the highest mark in Canada in 2001 when I did my teacher's exam. I'm also a composer. I have my own publishing company. I'm a teacher, of course, and an examiner and e-examiner for Conservatory Canada. So, and I also look after the contemporary repertoire list for Conservatory Canada. It's a large document, about 100 pieces listed in this, or no, about 100 pages of pieces listed. So we're excited to show off a couple thousand pieces we have in SuperScore.
Well, thank you for that, and really appreciate that you are here guiding our conversation on exam systems around the world, because you certainly have quite a bit of experience with them. Before we delve into that, I would like to welcome everybody here who's joining us to use the chat feature here in this Zoom webinar to let us know who you are and where you're from. It is very helpful for us to be able to get that information and to know that we've got an audience here. We do want to make sure that we answer all of your questions as we go along. And so we do have a Q&A window that you can open up. There's a button at the bottom of your Zoom screen for that purpose. And so if at any point a question comes to your mind, please enter it into the Q&A. It puts it into a queue for us, and we can keep an eye on that queue and make sure that we don't miss your question by the end of the webinar. I'd like to mention that this webinar is sponsored by my software company, Time Warp Technologies. You can find us on the web at timewarptech.com. We are the producers of Classroom Maestro for Mac and PC. It's an on-screen, on-the-fly electronic blackboard for illustrating musical concepts on a staff and on-screen keyboard. We produce Internet MIDI, which connects any MIDI-capable pianos or other instruments together over the Internet. An interactive music file player called Home Concert Extreme, and the iPad application SuperScore, which we will be using today. It's great to see now comments coming into the chat area from Calgary, Durham, Alberta, Minnesota, other places, North Carolina. So thank you for that information. I will tell you that if you stay with us to the end of the webinar, we will live be presenting some door prizes in SuperScore. So we hope that you will stay around for that. So the topic areas that we're going to be covering today are finding exam repertoire in SuperScore, talking a bit about how repertoire grading works, because we've got this wonderful online matrix of material that we're going to show you, and you probably want to get a sense for, well, what is the grading system behind all of this, and how have these things been categorized, and how do they line up with other exam systems. We want to talk about special features in SuperScore for not just viewing the music and playing from a digital score instead of from a piece of paper, but features that enable you to learn the music better or to teach the music in a more facile manner. Those things are very important. And in addition to repertoire that's appropriate for exams, there's some good material in SuperScore for other exam areas, such as theory kinds of tests that come up in certain exam systems, ear training technique, sight reading. So we're going to be covering those things. And I'm going to give you just a very brief look at where we're ultimately headed today, which is going to be over in this spot on the Time Warp website. This is a chart that you will have access to. I'll show you the URL for this or how you would find it later on, but it shows the listing of the exam systems whose syllabi we've examined. It gives you categories that you can click on down here, and you'll see lists of pieces that are listed by piece, composer, arranger, publisher, album, exam, syllabus. And as you can see, some of these go on a long ways. This is just grade 3 that I'm scrolling through here. And the way it's going to work ultimately is you'll be able to look at something like Crystals here. This is the name of the piece. Here's the composer, Christopher Norton. The publisher in SuperScore is CN Connections. You would find it in this particular album, Christopher Norton Connections for Piano. And this has been cited as an exam piece choice in Conservatory Canada's Contemporary Piano Syllabus, in the Music Teacher of Association of California Piano Syllabus, and other exam systems would no doubt accept that as a legitimate free choice if you proposed it.
Mm-hmm. How many pieces are in the list?
At this point, it's a little over 2,500 exam-worthy pieces. That's not to say that every one would be on everybody's exam lists. I mean, exam lists tend to be, you know, subsets of the possible choices. But the overwhelming majority of these 2,500 pieces are on at least one exam list somewhere in the world. So I think that shows that they're, as a group, certainly exam-worthy pieces for sure.
And in my researching all these conservatories, most of them have an own choice category. So if your conservatory is not listed specifically, it's not hard to get approved.
Absolutely.
Concan, for instance, approves pieces that aren't on their lists at no charge.
Excellent. Okay, well, I'd like to put a little preface onto, or let's call it a prelude, onto the main body of our presentation today, and just emphasize the fact that we're living in a very exciting time when things are changing. Times are changing, and you're looking at an image here from the Durham, North Carolina Teachers Association that had a festival this last year, and this student is going to play for this examiner, and normally the student will be required to have an extra copy of the music brought in, published music for the examiner, or if it's memorized, just hand the examiner her personal copy. But her personal copy is on the iPad. The examiner is willing to accept it and to follow the music from the iPad. It's really not an issue for an examiner to be able to read the music off the iPad, swipe across the screen to turn the pages. And in the case of an exam where the exam takes place at a distance, SuperScore certainly works fine for the examiner. Now, in this particular case, I think we're looking at a picture where the long distance is a fairly short distance, with the a student in another room appearing because of COVID issues appearing on the screen, but you could imagine this taking place over the internet. Andrew, I just got a message about in Zoom that I was just now sharing my screen. Have you seen all three of these pictures?
I have.
You have. Okay. I was afraid that maybe Zoom had skipped a couple of them.
I'll let you know right away if something's off.
Okay. I appreciate that. So, not to add confusion to things, but just to talk about one scenario where so many new things just all happened at once. I think it would be great if you would talk about an issue that came up with a student of yours taking a high-level exam this last year. I know a lot of exam systems and a lot of teachers are interested in music from undeservedly forgotten composers of the past. We're looking at one here named Louise Farranc. And you had a student, I think, who learned a piece out of SuperScore from this composer.
That's right. This is a rather difficult and advanced piece, but very attractive piece. And I showed it to my student whose name is Buzz. He was nicknamed Buzz because his older brother named him that when he was brought home from the hospital and he was into that Disney movie, Toy Story. Anyhow, this was such a great way for Buzz to learn this piece. And there are so many notes. He was able to learn it without any wrong notes. And he was able to use some of the features in it to really increase his tempo. For instance, practicing along one hand at a time or both hands, but at a slow tempo. It's a little more fun than just a metronome, but you can do that. And Buzz is a student of mine who lives in a city 2 hours from here. And I have had students as far away as Florida or Vancouver. And we use Internet MIDI, which is just a fantastic program where when they play a note in Florida, it immediately plays the note on my piano here in Canada. So I'm hearing a performance as if they were in the same room as I am in. And we talk by Zoom, but the other signal comes through the keyboards. I'm able to demonstrate, play back again. And it just works out really well. And this was very handy. Buzz has SuperScore. I have SuperScore. We both had identical scores to work from. And being a composer, I just love that these are all legal copies. And yeah, he had a tremendous time with this. And he may win an award for the highest mark in Canada on his exam. And we could probably blame SuperScore for a little bit of that because he did more than just this piece. And he didn't have to go back and relearn things because he learned it correctly the first time.
And am I correct that his exam was actually done long distance with Internet MIDI and the examiner had SuperScore and followed the score?
Yeah, that's right. Michael Faulkner in Belleville, which is about an hour the other way on the other side, was the examiner. He has a copy and he was able to follow along with the exact same score that Buzz had. So
very good.
Very amazing. And he wasn't that familiar with the piece. He was able to play it and get familiar with it beforehand.
So, Andrew, there's examination boards all over the world. We're not making any claims that any of these boards are endorsing SuperScore, SuperScore publications, or time warp technologies, but the repertoire that's available in SuperScore that we're showing today can be correlated with exam lists from these organizations all over the world. And there's some similarities and also some differences between them. Can you just give us a little overview of the examination world?
Okay. So why do we need examining boards? Well, they were a great way for students to achieve high standards. If you know you're going to be marked and adjudicated and get remarks back, you're going to work extra hard. These organizations also issue qualifications or exams for teachers. So if a teacher has, say, their ARCT, you know, they've gone through some very rigorous training and you're getting a teacher that knows what they're doing. They have a certificate. Pretty much all of these have certificates for each grade level. And so a grade 1 student can try their pieces and their scales, whatnot, and receive a mark. And they can compare that. They publish national averages usually of how their peers did on the same exam. Also, most of these are charitable organizations. And their goal is to help the music community really achieve their best. The oldest one that we found is the Royal, it's in the teal colored logo there, the Royal Irish Academy of Music. And they began doing exams back in 1848. So this has been going on for quite some time. And their patron was no one other than Queen Victoria. And they were well supported by people in the community. One gave a colossal amount of money, which must have equal about $1 million today, to really get the Irish Conservatory going. So it's the oldest one. The largest one is actually Trinity with 850,000 candidates annually. One that's below that, but still a tremendous number of students, is the ABRSM system, which has 650,000 students. And most of these organizations began doing exams in the 19th century. So the Royal is one of the older ones. Trinity, for sure, I think is, the second oldest. Conservatory Canada, even though it has a modern name, has been operating since 1891. All these systems have grades, and I thought that the British and Australian systems were 10 grades packed into 8. But I learned otherwise while studying all their lists. Basically, the first 8 grades are very similar. Some schools are a little bit harder than others. I found the ABRSM and the St. Cecilia had the toughest list. What we would call in grade 8 in Canada would be, they selected some grade 10 stuff and put in the grade 8 level. A number of these organizations partner with each other. For instance, the Royal partners with the California piano teachers. Trinity partners with the Irish one. The Australian Music Exam Board partners with ABRSM.
So it's a fascinating world, and we've just put together this massive list that's sort of synchronizing their exam lists with what's available in SuperScore. This is going to be an ongoing, evolving thing for us at Time Warp Technologies, and as we become acquainted with these exam systems and local ones around each of these countries, small regional ones, we'll be including them as we go.
There's one thing I should clarify. The first 8 grades are very similar, but in Canada, we go grade 9, grade 10, and then the associate. But most of these other systems, their grade 9 is called an associate. And then there's a licentiate, and then you become a fellow of the university or the organization. And then you're going on to grading factors. So I've been teaching for 33 years now, and then I graded that massive contemporary list for Conservatory Canada a number of years ago. And these are some of the factors that come into play when selecting a grade. For instance, I have had pieces submitted to me that look like grade 1 level, but they were just too lengthy for a grade 1 student. So that can be a factor in what grade is put in. Handspan is another one. You're not going to see octaves in, say, level 1. That most grade 1 students can't reach that. There's other things like keys. As the grades go up, there's more keys. Rhythm complexity goes up. You might have polyrhythms or technical elements. You might have double third scales. Texture, you could have homophonic music, monophonic with chords, contrapuntal music,
So,
and
Andrew,
etc.
could I interject on that and basically postulate that this basket of issues is something that all of these systems take into account when they do their gradings, and they're probably all, if they were to order pieces from the easiest to the hardest, would probably think of most of them in the same way, but the slot in which they put it, is this a grade 6 or a grade 5 or a grade 7, would be maybe a little bit off. And that's basically the kind of difference that we're seeing in the chart here on the Time
Yeah.
Warp website.
Yeah. So your selection should be within a grade, but like I mentioned with St. Cecilia, they had grade 10 pieces in grade 8. So they were the ones that went the furthest that way.
Okay. Well, I think we better jump right into SuperScore. So I'm going to switch over to sharing my iPad. And we want to talk today about a whole variety of features of music as it appears in SuperScore that helps with students with their development just in general, and then more specifically in the learning of any particular piece. Now, this is the cover of the etude that we started off by talking about. Here is the music, and this is a human performance. It's actually my performance. I took it a bit on the fast side. We do have tempo control in SuperScore, but I'd like you to listen to a little bit of it and get the sense that, you know, when it's not played to a metronome, but it is played freely, that there are undulations to the tempo. And so forth. So that one whizzes by, but right from the beginning, when a student purchases a piece of music like this, the fact that they can hear it and take a piece which, in the case of Louise Farranc, is not a familiar piece, is not something the student is likely to have ever heard before, they can get quite familiar with it from the get-go because the music is literally speaking to the student from the beginning. Now, here's an example of another piece with a human performance. This is actually done by Andrew, published by
I played this one.
Harbridge Publications, and we'll listen to a little bit of this one.
It's a grade 9 piece with Conservatory Canada.
So that performance I would characterize as being quite a steady performance. But if you listen carefully, you notice, for instance, at the end of that last section there, there's a sense of relaxation in the performance that's appropriate to the end of the phrase and the end of that section of the piece. Let's take a look.
I also have two versions of that one with repeats and one without.
Oh yeah, and that's another nice feature of your publication, specifically in SuperScore, because well, very often it's just more practical to work on it without the repeats taking place. Now, to look at a piece of a completely different nature from an album by Paul Sheftel, published by Cyber Conservatory, Blues and All That Jazz, this is a piece that, well, it's got some humor involved in it for sure, but it starts off in 3/4, and then it's going to switch to 12/8, and 12/8 has got syncopation going on. And you can imagine that if you didn't know what this sounded like, sure, you could grind out, you know, counting all of the notes out and sort of mathematically figuring it out. But if you just have a chance to listen to it and experience the performance, in this case by the editor or arranger slash composer himself, you get a different perspective on things. And I'll stop it right there. So you get a sense of just how natural that transition really was from 3/4 to 12/8, and how beautifully expressed the syncopations were. No sense of stress and struggle about it. And so right here from the beginning, the student has got a really wonderful model that can guide the learning of the piece. Now, another example just of on this topic of musical playback in SuperScore, I want to take you over here to a Children's Garden of Verses, composed by Chi Wan Tan, published by Piano Safari. It's got some lovely imaginative pictures from books of the past and a poem to go with it and spark one's imagination. And in this case, the performances, kind of like the Paul Sheftel piece, is by the composer herself. This is the page turn in SuperScore. You can move your eyes to the next page whenever you find it convenient.
If I can interject, these scores are beautiful. When you look at what's out there, these scores just win hands down for, it looks like the best printed book you could buy.
And we haven't yet talked about things like the liquid notation display that enables you to resize the music, switch your iPad to a different orientation, and so forth. The music literally gets re-engraved on the fly and reshapes the slurs and so forth as it goes.
If it's easier to read, the students learn quickly or more quickly.
Oh, absolutely. One more example here of playback that I'd like to mention. Time Warp Technologies publishes 12 Country Dances for the year 1779 by Ignatius Sancho. This is a really interesting composer who is not particularly well known, but his name is starting to crop up here and there these days as people have gotten interested in so-called BIPOC composers, Black and Indigenous and people of color. He was a man who was born into slavery in the 1720s, and somehow, despite being sold into slavery, ultimately ending up as a child in England, achieved his freedom, became a property owner, was the first person of African descent to vote in a parliamentary election, etc. I'm going to be giving a separate webinar just on him. He's painted here by Thomas Gainsborough. But he published these 12 country dances, and in SuperScore, we actually show the original publication. But it's an interesting thing to imagine confronting the music when it was written for harpsichord, and yet you're going to be playing it on the piano today. And, you know, the original had no fingering, it had no articulation markings in the score. What would you do with that? And of course, you have to make some decisions. So in this SuperScore publication, the piece is actually published twice, once in an urtext fashion, which is what you see here, and in a moment I'll show you the edited version. The urtext has a harpsichord performance. Now if we move over to the edited version, I'm going to play both sections, avoid the repeats. So I'm going to start it right here. And this is a piece that is really interesting in that if you were to play this in a comfortable fashion, you need to come up with what your articulation scheme is going to be and then finger it to that scheme. So you're picking up your hand and moving it around in logical places according to the dictates of the articulation. And so as the editor, this is what I recommend, but it's only one way to interpret the music. It's a wonderful piece. It's the only one in the set that starts off in a minor key, and the fact that it doesn't even stay in that key but migrates to the relative major is kind of interesting. And there's a bit of a story behind that, but that will be saved for another day. So Andrew pointed out this issue of changing the size of the music and how that affects the reading experience. So I'd like to probe that a little bit. This is a series called Classics Outside the Box, published by Cyber Conservatory, edited by Paul Sheftel and myself. Paul has composed backing tracks to the pieces, and if we were to go to the parts menu, you can see that this has a part for English horn and timpani to accompany. I'm just going to turn those parts off by pressing this button in the lower right corner because I'm focused right now just on the piano music itself. Certainly when you're zoomed out like this, you can see the whole structure of the piece. There's an A section that goes up to the double bar. There's a contrasting section, and it repeats the A section. So you can see it's an ABA form. But when it comes right down to reading the music, and you're at an early level of playing, well, you probably need to get focused on things like, well, what is that left hand doing, and how do I shape my hand for these chords? And in the right hand, I'm playing notes going up by seconds, and I got to skip down a third, up a second, and then down a fifth. There's a stretch going on there. And when students are still getting good at discriminating between lines and spaces, this ability to magnify the score and really zoom in and look at it is very helpful. When they get better at that, to zoom out and be able to see more of the music at one time and what's coming up is obviously very helpful.
Many kids have to write with their fingers, so if you make the score bigger, they can write in the counting, and you shrink it. It looks nice and neat too.
Certainly, we could put a 1 here if we wanted to, and then put a 2 there, and maybe make that in red if I wanted. I maybe made that a little bit too big. We could shrink it down, move it around a little bit. So you can do those kinds of things, and we'll be talking more about markups in just a bit. But here's just a little bit of the music. And I'll point out that this piece was recorded by a human being, but it was edited to be exactly in strict time because the feeling at this point was it would benefit the students to have a performance that they could play along with that was in strict time. And if they turned on the metronome, and we'll be talking about the metronome later, that the metronome would be ticking in strict time as well. Now we go to something that's more complicated though, like a piece from Just For You, Level 2 of Dennis Alexander, published by Alfred. Here's a piece called Almost a Waltz. Let's listen to some of this. Probably a little small in terms of the print. Let's make it a little bigger. So again, this is a piece that you're likely playing this at a higher reading level, being able to see more of the music at one time, to be able to look at entire left-hand measures and notice a chord that's defined by the complete measure itself, not just one event at a time, would be important. And I'll point out to you that there is an accompaniment here, and I'll just turn it on as playback starts. So this is an interesting example of something that's in strict time, yet you get to a fermata and there's some space that's provided.
And it's nice not to fiddle around with CD players and MP3 players and all that. It's right here with the score.
That's right. There's no sense of, well, I got to go to a website in order to find a recording of it and whatnot. It's literally right here. Okay, well, let's talk about playback from the perspective of tempo and the fact that we don't have to be stuck with the tempo that's in the performance. This is a piece of publication of yours, Andrew. Is this on a number of exam systems?
Yes, it comes up in the Canadian systems at grade 9, more than one system, and it does show up on in the other boards as well. If the other schools are like Conservatory Canada, they are required to know something about the composer. And if you go back that one page there, I have made up a little biography of Desquin, and it's just very interesting for the students to read, and it adds a little depth to the music as well.
Could we rephrase that when you said you made up a biography?
Oh, yes. I didn't just make it up, researched it carefully and put it in a form that would be great for students to read.
Got to be careful, Andrew. Students can be literal.
Yes. We try to include pictures of the composers. There's performance tips with a lot of these too. And there's different practices in music, such as Baroque music. So that's covered there. And I often talk about ornamentation and whatnot. This piece is vite, so it moves very, very fast. So it's very important that the student learn the fingering correctly. And I have most of my students move this down to 50% speed. Well, actually, I would start them off with using learn mode. They'd get the notes learned correctly. When they had that under their fingers a little bit, switch to normal mode. And then at about 50% tempo, I'd have them play along. So this is me performing this one. There are some little differences with the tempos or the tempi, and you can hear how the ornaments go. You can slow it right down and hear exactly what's happening with the ornaments. By the way, in the PDFs, I explain which notes I used for the ornaments.
Very good. So let me break down some of the things that you just mentioned. If we were to listen to a bit of the original performance, we'd have this. Now, you mentioned, well, maybe it would be a good idea to just make sure you've learned the right notes and got your fingers in the right place, and you mentioned learn mode. SuperScore has a number of interactive playback modes that are engaged if you have a MIDI-capable instrument. So in the upper left corner, there is a gear button, and if you tap on the gear button and you go to MIDI setup, we're not going to get into the details of how you do this, but you would connect to your MIDI keyboard. And then if you tap on the playback mode down in the lower left corner and choose learn, what's going to happen is the program's going to wait for you to play that note. And it's not going to move the cursor until you do. And then when you play the note correctly, it'll move to the next spot and so forth. I'm not connected to a MIDI keyboard now to demonstrate that for you, but that's what learn mode is going to do. Now, if we go back to normal playback and do as Andrew suggested, reduce the tempo to roughly half or so, we would have something like this.
Yeah, the student can intend on starting slowly, but before you know it, they've increased the tempo. So this makes them stay at a slower speed. I should mention that SuperScore has worked unbelievably well with students of mine that don't like reading the score. They have good ears, but not quite good enough to catch every detail of a score, and they will not look at the music. But as soon as I put this in front of them, they kept their eyes on the music the whole time. And I, in fact, say, you can look down once in a while, but because they get that immediate feedback, they're reading music for the first time. Before SuperScore, I'd have to just feed them 4 measures at a time. They'd learn it. Hopefully they practiced, so I didn't have to reteach it again. And they could work independently between the lessons and come back with the whole piece learned.
Well, that business of independence between the lessons is really the key thing, because at the end of the day, we get just a limited amount of time with a student, typically once a week. And every other contact that the student has with the piano during the week, the student is on their own. The student has to become his or her own teacher and really take ownership of the learning situation. And you're not there to give feedback. But with SuperScore and the playback and the potential interactivity with learn mode and so forth, they've got tools with which to work. And these tools can be motivating in a number of different ways that not only excite them about practicing, but also provide some guardrails on their work. So let's talk about that in terms of an accompaniment. Here's a piece of yours, Andrew, Pirate Dance, and you've added a little accompaniment. Let's listen.
That's right.
To it. And what I like about this is when the student is playing along with the accompaniment, and it's deliberately been done in strict time, they're going to navigate the beats that are divided into 2 eighth notes and the beats that are divided into triplet eighth notes, and have no trouble in a very short period going back and forth between those 2 different kinds of subdivisions of the beat.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I kept the rhythm nice and clear on this one, so that a student that's maybe a little weak at following can.
Now, Christopher Norton's Connections series are just ubiquitous on examination lists. Here's another example of a piece with backing tracks. We can see we got a drum kit, nylon string guitar, acoustic bass. Let's hear a bit of this. So many things going on in there, and some rather extended harmonies as well. So much that could be said about the piece. But in any case, you've got a play-along context that will help out quite a bit. Let's take a look at one more play-along context. This is from the Jazz, Rags, and Blues series, Martha Meir, published by Alfred. This is book 3, and a piece called Waterfront Jazz. And for backing tracks, we have flute, drum kit, electric piano, fingered bass. And all of these parts can be individually turned on and off for playback if you wish. I'll have to confess that I had gotten all the way through my college career without ever knowing what swing eighth notes were all about. uh, and it's nice to have a broad range of literature for students, and you can deal with these things. And here in SuperScore, you can hear those swung eighth notes as the triplets that they are, even though they're notated in this rather squarish fashion that we use for that purpose. We've got a metronome. Andrew, you mentioned that this would be a good piece to show the metronome. Over in the lower right corner is a metronome button. I'll just turn it on. You gave a pretty steady performance of this in your recording, and so we're going to hear a very steady metronome when we turn it on.
Yeah, and now what's so tricky about this piece is getting those scales tidy. And so practicing with a metronome helps a lot, or practicing against in normal mode is really, really helpful.
Just playing along with the piano recording.
Yes.
But we also have options for turning on or off the playback of either hand. And so you could practice one hand while the SuperScore plays the other. And that was something we were going to look at very briefly in another piece in this publication, which is the Waltz in A flat. Why did I just do that? Let's just imagine that you were going to be practicing your left hand.
Oh, I can't hear the left hand. Is it shut off?
Yes, because I said let's imagine playing the left hand.
Sorry about that.
I turned that off. And there was a count off. I skipped that, but it would count you in, and then you would play your left hand. And of course, you can change the tempo. So you got a lot of learning options for something like that. Andrew, I think because we're running on short on time, we're not going to illustrate it, but we do have options for setting up loops, and you can create practice loops that will go back and forth just a section of the piece.
It comes with a small hand version as well.
That particular one, the Waltz does, and we were going to show the looping mode here in for release, but we'll just mention that we've got for release.
Yes. The looping mode's very handy to go over and over a measure where the student's having some trouble.
I'll just play just a touch of this. This is a piece I was playing at the beginning as you were coming in, just to illustrate the sense of rubato that is available in many of the scores. And if you were watching the tempo indicators in the lower right-hand corner of the screen, you'd notice that they were really all over the place. Yet the performance made so much sense. Now, there's another dimension that's available with some of the published music in SuperScore, and Andrew, you've been kind of a pioneer in this. Here's this.
I'm becoming a movie maker.
That's right. So here's just 2 bars of this wonderful piece by Rybakov.
I just love this piece.
But you've put it into an imaginative context for the student to consider. In the upper right corner, there's a film strip button.
This is me playing it. You can see SuperScore. But I like to tell this little story about this soldier going off to war. I had somebody write in saying, I don't normally watch videos like this to the end, but this storyline kept me right to the very end of the recording.
So if you want to know more about the story, you'll have to go and get the music.
And the next,
very briefly here, this Moskovsky Etude published by Jamie Schock, Piano Music. She's taken this wonderful etude, broken it down into chord structures for learning purposes. She's got a wonderful performance here, obviously, that's embedded. But if we were to tap on the film strip button, And I'll just scrub to an arbitrary place here. She's going to talk about it.
This piece fits perfectly after about a year of Czerny and before the Chopin etudes of Opus 10 and 25.
So she's going to go through and she's going to perform it. She's going to talk about how to approach it and so forth. So other aspects for the way in which this material can come to life. So we switch ahead here to one here of yours, Andrew. If we were to listen to your performance through the video, I think we'd get a little history along with it.
Yeah, yes. So I have a number of history videos. And you can even scrub a little bit further into this one. And we have a little bit of history. He ran his own publishing company with up to 50 employees, where he lived, a little geography lesson.
Wonderful things there.
And you can see the original score on the PDF of that one. This is a very popular number.
Comes up in a lot of exam systems. We're all familiar with it, I'm sure. Some imaginative video to go with it. I'll scrub into the middle. How's that?
Yeah, scrub it through to the ballerina. This video has had 13,000 views on Vivo in about a month.
I really hate to cut it, but we have to keep it.
Yeah, we have to.
So what I want to do next is make sure you're aware of how you can get to sources of information on the things that we've been showing you. So I'm going to go back over here to my web browser and basically tell you that if you go to timewarptech.com, which is the home of Time Warp Technologies, the publisher of SuperScore, Internet MIDI, Classroom Maestro, and so forth. If you look at the top in resources, a menu drops down, and if you tap on SuperScore, you'll get a whole bunch of different resources here, some videos, some webinars we did with Christopher Norton, Piano Safari, information about connecting an iPad to a keyboard. But right here, if you click on this, SuperScore Guide to Graded Piano Literature and Exam Repertoire, you will get to our guide. And we have a note here mentioning that, these festivals and organizations aren't necessarily endorsing these editions, but we've correlated them. And we can choose a grade. You've got two different sets of scroll bars. There's one that's going to scroll this, but then you've got another one that's going to scroll your entire window. So if you're not seeing the tabs at the bottom, you may have to go to the outer scroll bar to do it, but you'll be able to find things. And with any particular piece, such as this one by Christopher Norton, you can see, well, one grading system is going to put it at grade 3, another one says grade 4. In this system, it actually appears in two different lists, 4 and 5. But they're all within relative range of each other. And if you're not putting your students into exam systems, you may just find these graded lists just excellent organizations for you of material that's available in SuperScore. And you've got a student who's been able to play one particular piece, where could I find other pieces at this level or perhaps the next level up, or maybe the next level or two down for sight reading purposes. James is asking, does this work with instruments other than piano? Almost all the piano literature or music literature that's available in SuperScore today is piano literature. We are branching out this year in publishing and encouraging publishers to publish music for other instruments in SuperScore. We do have a few examples, but that's an area that will be growing in the future. As far as interactive playback is concerned, that requires a MIDI-capable instrument, and that doesn't have to be piano necessarily. There are MIDI recorders and wind instruments and percussion instruments and so forth. And And James is also asking, how can I use SuperScore to administer oral awareness like melody playbacks? So this is right up our alley of where we were headed, Andrew, with our session here today. So let me go back to sharing my iPad.
So if this, I have a very advanced album for grade 9. You could use it with grade 8, actually.
Yes. But before you talk about it, let me just get this up on the screen and mention to people, when it comes to going and finding this repertoire, there is a shopping cart button. You tap on that, you see the publishers, and you can go into a publisher folder like Harbridge, and you can find individual pieces that Andrew's published. There's a whole set here, 8 levels of essential repertoire. Then there's some things that we're going to talk about called expert ear and so forth. If you were a little uncertain about something and you just wanted to type in a key word like, how about the word ear? We'll find this particular album. And that searching feature is now something that we have in the library here. So I've got a library of a lot of pieces. I type in ear, and I'm going to find something like expert ear. Which one should we go to? Number 4, level 4?
Sure.
So this is an interesting album. Where would you like me to open it up?
Go to the, I'll briefly cover the 3 categories. So we have chord identification, and you can just simply hit play, and the student could write down on a piece of paper if they hear major and minor triads in this case. And this goes a little further beyond just hearing. You can set it in learn mode, and the student will have to play a major or minor triad based on the root of the chord given in every other measure. So that's very handy. They have to learn how to make them and how to hear them. Then there's the interval one if you want to go to, oh, and you can display the answers.
Right, so let me just explain what we just did here. You're hearing a chord. You're tasked with answering. Is that major or minor?
Yeah. Is it major or minor?
Maybe you write it down. But if you're in learn mode and we let the moving cursor continue, it's going to stop right at this spot. And if you, with C as the bottom note, were to play the appropriate chord, in this case major or minor, if you got it right, the cursor will move on. So this is a way of answering the question with your own fingers themselves, which is another element of learning that's very, very helpful. The parts menu, we can see that there are answers, and the answers would be revealed, and you'd understand where you went wrong on something.
And I've included instructional movies with it as well. The student can watch that on their own. We have interval identification.
And at this point, if you were in learn mode, you'd play C, and then you'd play the note that's supposed to follow. And again, we've got the answer there. That was a perfect 5th. And what else?
Yeah, the melody playbacks. Again, there was a movie for that one.
And so there are these videos, and Andrew gives some instruction here as to how to go about using.
The examiner has to go by.
So we heard a broken triad at the beginning to establish the sense of the key, and then there is the melody itself. And there are instructions here that guide you into how to use this material in an interactive fashion.
Yeah, this records if you're in the proper mode, it will record their performance, and then they can compare their performance with what's in SuperScore and judge for themselves.
Absolutely. James is asking a further question here. Can I share this presentation with the state panel for testing in Michigan? And of course the answer is absolutely yes. And we will be posting a video playback of this webinar. So we're really at the end of our time here. I would like to mention that this area of interactive materials for sight reading, theory, ear training is a growing area, and we do have materials from other publishers that are doing interesting things. If we were to go, for instance, to a publisher called Music Keys, where
and Melody, yes, I'll be working on all the levels of expert ear.
Right. So at the moment you've got 4 and 9, and you're going to be filling in the other levels.
And 9 will work for grade 8 with the melody playbacks. There's 2 simultaneous melodies. You can just shut off one and use that with grade 8, which is a single melody.
So with this product, I believe this one is one that's associated with, I can't remember now if it's Catmount
California, I think.
Which one? Oh, it's the MTAC, Music Teachers Association of California. They have very specific things that they want you to do at certain levels, like in this case, in certain keys, be able to play the notes of the 5-fingered position, broken chord, do this in a number of different keys. At other levels, they've got scales and chord progressions that are required. And so this album is specifically the actual exercises that would be required by that system. So,
and I have a set for Conservatory Canada that exactly matches the classical system, grades 1 to grade 8. And they include keyboard harmony, sight reading, ear tests on top of the technique.
Mm-hmm. So, Andrew, Melody is asking, when can we expect more levels of expert ear? So now you're on the hook.
Yes, this year.
This year.
If you have a request, I can do that grade first.
So I'm sure we're going to be getting more and more specific material that is targeted to certain systems. I can tell you that one of our publishers has done material for the Illinois MTNA, and and I'm having a moment here, losing track of a couple of things, but quite a bit of material. So,
I have a request for grade 7. I will do grade 7 next.
Grade 7
okay, we have our big draw.
Okay, so we need to explain this very carefully to give everybody an appropriate opportunity. Oh, and I am sharing in the wrong way. Let me make this a little bit cleaner. Sorry about that.
So while you do that, you are going to see an email address in the next few moments. The first 5 people to email me will get their choice of products from Harbridge Publishing House. So some of these publications are worth up to $26. So Canadian. I'm not sure what they are in American, but the first 5 people.
Okay, so get ready to send an email. We're about to show the address. It's one that's, I think, never been revealed before. And here it is. Andy Harbridge at hotmail.com.
Start typing now.
And while you're typing, I will begin to answer a question here from Patty. She says, I use Royal Conservatory. Do you have a list of comparative levels? So in a moment, I'm going to go back to our list on the web and clarify my answer to that question.
Well, Royal Conservatory, you're very lucky because the grade system matches pretty much perfectly with what you're doing. I went by the Canadian standards. So you might find a few differences, like Furley's is grade 6, Conservatory Canada, grade 7, Royal Conservatory. And my essential books are designed for schools like the Royal Conservatory.
Okay, so I'm about to take this email off the screen. That's the Andy Harbridge at hotmail.com. And
And I have 5 people.
Oh, you do? Okay, so we can consider that our drawing has been taken care of. We will be contacting those 5 people after the fact. Give us a little bit of time to do that. I'm going to go back to sharing my screen. So to be clear, here on the Time Warp website, when you go to Resources, SuperScore, and then you click on this spot here, SuperScore Guide to Graded Piano Literature and Exam Repertoire, you get to this page. And at the very bottom, you see preparatory grade 1, 2, up to grade 10. Now, these grades are according to our concept, and I'm using the royal our because it's actually Andrew who has graded them. And I think it's probably fair to say, Andrew, that these are consistent with the grading by Conservatory Canada. And there are various systems such as the Royal Conservatory that are virtually the same in terms of how grading is viewed. Would that be a correct statement?
Yes.
Okay. And if I were to choose a grade like grade 7, you could be confident that these are grade 7 pieces from the perspective of Conservatory Canada, and likely from the perspective of the Royal Conservatory. If you were part of a different system, like the Australian, New Zealand cultural arts system, which is this one here that I'm highlighting, and you were to look at a particular piece like this one called At the Rodeo by Christopher Norton, you'd see that they're considering this to be grade 5, but Conservatory Canada and our spot here on the list is grade 7. They're grading in a way in which some of the harder pieces are a level or 2 lower in their system. And so, and we can see this playing out. Birmingham Blues of Martha Meir, again, Conservatory Canada is seeing that as grade 7, but this Australian New Zealand group is seeing that as grade 5. But then we have some that are splitting the difference. AGME, which, remind me, Andrew, this is the Australian Guild of Music Educators?
Yes.
They're pegging this at grade 6, and it's appearing on the grade 6 and 5 lists of the California Professional Music Teachers. And St. Cecilia, which you had indicated, puts things a little bit more difficult.
They're a little tougher.
A little tougher. They've got it at grade 5. So those are the kinds of discrepancies that you'll see, but you'll get a sense for, all right, if I'm on one of these systems that's not Conservatory Canada or Royal Conservatory, I can probably look down here, and if I'm looking at grade 7, think maybe that's grade 5 or 6. If I'm looking at grade 6, maybe that's grade 5 or 4, and you would see those differences. So hopefully that gives you a sense. And again, what we're listing on the right column is what's actually on an examination syllabus today. These are things that change often from year to year. In some cases, an exam system sticks with one thing or another for a period of time. So I hope that answers that question. Do you have any further remarks on that, Andrew?
Well, I could give first names of the 5 winners.
Oh, okay. Let's hear them.
Francis. There was only one Francis, one Mary, one Melody, James, and Margaret.
Okay.
You'll be contacted sometime today.
Today, or maybe tomorrow if it doesn't happen today, but
yes.
Very soon.
You could look through SuperScore and go shopping.
That's right. Looking in Harbridge Publishing House
folder.
That's where you would make your selection for the items that have been won today. Well, we're willing to hang for a few more moments if anybody has further questions. I really appreciate the wonderful comments that have shown up here at the end of the session in the chat area. It was a lot of fun for us to put this together. And of course, the ongoing development of SuperScore and the migration of old-fashioned, shall we call it, static paper scores into this new digital area where the music comes to life, has the opportunity for interactivity that connects to human performance, for which there are accompaniments and so many learning features, is very exciting for both of us to be involved with. And
by the way, this has been fantastic for my students that are a little disorganized. Everything's in one place. It's in their iPad. So they're not forgetting scores.
Melody is asking, it says, apologies, I missed what the melody playback one was. So why don't I briefly show that. I'm going to reshare my iPad here. And where's my sharing button? Sharing back to the iPad. In SuperScore, if you go to the store into Harbridge, you'll notice that there's an album called Expert Ear Level 4 and one below it which is Expert Ear Level 9 and above. And so it was Expert Ear Level 4 that we had demonstrated some things for you. And so that was the title and where to find it.
What's neat in the Expert Ear 9 in grade 9, you have to play the top melody while two are played. Grade 10, you have to play the bottom melody. The associate, you have to play both. So you can have all those combinations with your melody playbacks.
So it's an extraordinary material, actually, that you've put together, Andrew, in those 2 volumes, because traditionally, a student needs help working on that. It has to have another human being to play an example, the student responds, and so forth. And now, for the student to be able to do this interactively on their own is crucial. And of course, it takes a lot of examples, and it's a lot of work on your part to put that together.
Yeah. And like I said before, in Learn mode, it records their performance so they can compare the right answer with their answer. I don't know if anywhere else you can do that.
That's true. Well, I think that we should bring this to a conclusion here. We might mention that you and I have been invited to do a webinar a week from Friday for Conservatory Canada specifically. So this is going to be focused on learning materials in SuperScore. And of course, the focus there is on specifically for the Conservatory Canada system, but broadly speaking, the concepts are the same for any system, or even for teachers who aren't doing exams. We all want our students to learn and to get better. So you might look for notifications on that. Please find us on Facebook. SuperScore and Time Warp Technologies have Facebook pages there. You'll find both of us posting in piano teacher groups. And we will be sending out an email to all of you who registered for this event for the video replay, should you like to revisit anything or to share it with colleagues. So, thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
And
oh, by the way, we take requests for repertoire if it's in the public domain. Just send a message to George.
Yep, absolutely. We'll do that. And James, yes, we would be delighted with any of your contributions that you can send our way to add to the spreadsheet. Absolutely. So until the next time, and we do hope to see you again in cyberspace, we'll just say goodbye for now. Take care.
Bye-bye, everyone.